Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And joining me are the foremost authorities on the Houston Cougars and my old friends from the Scott Holman Pawdcast, Sam Razz and Dustin Rensink. And it's great to have you guys back on the show. I want to get right into this because I thought UH flat out looked like the better team against Tech, but they just shot themselves in the foot over and over again, guys.
Yeah, it was tough. There were certainly moments when it felt like Houston was a better team, especially the way that the defensive line, Derek Parrish in particular, were playing much of that game. It felt like Tech's offense was a couple of big pass plays that they broke, one of which was frustratingly for the second week in a row involved two U of H defensive backs running into each other and kind of tackling each other, leading to a long touchdown pass for the opposition. But outside of a couple of long pass plays, yeah, it just felt like Houston was a better team for much of the game. And, and certainly, it's very concerning that I think for the second week in a row, the offense came out and just could not finish a drive to save their life in the first half of the second game in a row. And certainly U of H, has themselves to blame for some other issues, the just absolutely foolish roughing the punter penalty that took, absolutely didn't affect the play at all, but took for the second week in a row, took a Tank Dell punt return touchdown off the board, which was another repeat of last week. Last week, it was a, just terrible call that took the punt return touchdown off the board. This time it was an obvious call for something that's dumb and you just can't do, just clobbering the punter that took the TD off the board. So definitely plenty of frustrations, and and definitely I don't think U of H can go saying that they deserve to win because they made too many mental mistakes. They as Dana Holgerson put it today, they had too much dumb crap that they did in that game, and they have themselves to blame for a lot of that. But it is frustrating because it's not a game where Tech was dominating in the line, just had, on the lines, and just had a clearly better team than U of H. I thought U of H matched up with them well. And, I think if you run that game back 100 times, I think U of H probably wins more than half the time. But, you can't make those dumb mistakes. And, Tech made them pay. So credit to them.
Yeah, would co-sign everything Dustin said. The 30,000 foot result here is, a 3-point loss where you were a 3-point underdog. May not seem so bad on paper, but how you got from point A to point B on that 3-point loss is just unbelievably painful if you're a Cougar fan. Just so many chances to win that game that slipped through the team's fingers, and obviously made something that may not have seemed like it would be, a tough to take result. A 3-point loss to a team you were fairly even matched with on the road made it a lot harder to take, obviously, looking at the game in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, it was, there's just so much to talk about with this one. And just a reminder also to our viewers on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and like and comment. Really need your help kind of growing the show out. Sam and Dustin, the Cougs defense, great last season, but you had the 4th and 20 in overtime this week. Plus it's 2 weeks in a row where an opponent drove into field goal range in less than 38 seconds. What's going on with this defense late in games?
Yeah, if I had the question to that, I think definitively, I think I would have a lot of friends right now in that coaching office on Cullen Boulevard. This is one of those times I kind of wish I was one of those analytics geeks, because I'd really like to go look at the 2021 college football data and see how many teams the entirety of last season surrendered a game-tying drive with under 40 seconds left on the clock. And that you've done it twice in the last 2 weeks, and the season's been only 2 weeks, has been just quite frustrating. And I think the most general explanation for it is I feel like on those two drives, the defense tried to play differently. This is not a risk-averse defense generally. This is a defense that thrives on an aggressive front, a front that we saw on Saturday, have Derek Parrish, have 4 sacks and put a lot of pressure on Texas Tech's quarterback, Donovan Smith. And you saw in week 1, Frank Harris was able to escape a lot of that for UTSA, but I want to say U of H had some of the most pressures created by any defense in the entirety of college football in week 1. And I feel like on both of those game-ending drives, UH did a lot more dropping 7 or 8 and did a lot more, risk-averse defense, the kind of that classic prevent defense that probably has driven more than a few fans insane over the years. And I sort of, in the most general sense, get why you don't want to look back on it. Let's say Tech just breaks off to 75-yard touchdown reception. You don't want to look back on it and feel like, oh, we didn't do our best to keep the play in front of us. We didn't do our best to keep them from breaking off a big play when the only thing we can't give up is a big play. But I think you've kind of seen generally this defense's I guess, weak point really get tested these first 2 weeks. That's what really concerned me going into the season about UTSA and Texas Tech, is that they were two offenses really designed to go after what this Cougar defense was going to have the most work to do on in the early season, figuring out life without Pepe Williams and Marcus Jones, two guys who are playing on Sundays right now. And I think a lot of programs much bluer blood than U of H would struggle to figure out life without those two. But I think the most general answer to that is I feel like U of H has gotten risk averse in those situations when this isn't a defense that's going to be able to really drop 7 or 8 and do well. I realize situationally you have to do that sometimes, but I think you saw on the 2 drives that UTSA and Texas Tech used to tie those games late, and that 4th and 20 U of H really got risk averse, only rushed 3 guys and I think paid for it. And I certainly hope that, with 2 weeks of this now in the books, that the defensive brain trust over in the U of H staff is really looking at how they're going to handle those late game situations. I don't know if you'll be in this exact same situation, 3 weeks in a row, but this won't be the last time. Hopefully this team has to hold a close lead late in a game. And I really hope that they've looked at what's not worked here these first 2 weeks and are going to do something different the next time that comes up. I think this has to be a defense that attacks at all times, even at times when maybe you wouldn't normally conventionally want to attack.
Yeah, oh man, I hope it's not 3 weeks in a row. If we're UH has a 3-point lead with like 40 seconds to go against Kansas and we're kicking the ball off, I'm going to be sweating bullets, let me tell you. But no, I agree with what Sam said. I think it's probably a combination of the fact that, I think the secondary is definitely behind the defensive line and the linebackers in terms of, the strength of the units on the defensive side for Houston, which is not necessarily a huge insult to the Cougar secondary. The Houston defensive line is fantastic, and the Houston linebacking group, led by Donovan Mutin, I think is really strong as well. And they are replacing a couple of, high draft pick NFL corners from that secondary. So certainly I think there's some issues there. But yeah, I think, and it'll be hard for you to ever get me to say a bad word about Doug Belk and the Cougar, defensive coaching staff. But as much as he's done a great job, and as much as I don't doubt for a second that he is a, future longtime successful head coach, like everyone seems to think he is, I agree with Sam. I think he's going to be spending this, next couple of days, if he hasn't already been spending a lot of time thinking about what are we going to do in these, traditional prevent defense type of situations, because, there's, it's hard when you can't, as a, college football fan, usually see the all 22 footage, but I saw someone had a screenshot on Twitter today where it was the 4th and 20 and the guy had the ball 5 yards short of the first down line, and there was like 6 U of H defenders behind the first down line. And it's like, okay, I appreciate you don't want to give up a touchdown there either, but you can't be that badly like on your heels in a 4th and 20 situation that you're just giving up 21 yards to avoid giving up the touchdown. That's just, and you can't be, if you're up 3 with 40 seconds to go, you can't just drop so far back into coverage and rush 3 that you are essentially just inviting them down, Broadway to come and set up a game time field goal. And I would, at the risk of being lame enough to like blame the officials, I would point out one of the UTSA's completions when they got downfield, just blatant holding on Derek Parrish, where he just got, dragged down to the ground. And, I thought on the 4th and 20, it looked like the left or the right tackle for Tech, I thought we got away with a pretty obvious hold there as well. So, I mean, I'm sure if, as a U of H fan, you'd like to think that you throw flags in those situations and the UTSA game doesn't go to overtime and the Tech game doesn't, ends in the first overtime and U of H is 2-0 at this point. But, I think you also got to be aware in that situation, not very many referees want to throw a flag in overtime. Not very many referees want to throw a flag in the final 30 seconds of regulation, to kind of prevent the home team from making a comeback. So you got to be aware in that situation how the game is being called and adjust accordingly. And you got to figure out, regardless of whether, the penalty gets called or not, you got to figure out a way to get off the field on 4th and 20. So like I said, Doug Belk's an incredibly smart guy, incredible football mind. And, I just have a funny feeling that in a similar situation going forward, we might see U of H maybe mix things up a little bit.
All right, that's the defense. So, Sam, what's wrong with the offense? Outside of the end of the UTSA game, it's been shaky. Coach sounds frustrated with the offensive line.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's kind of like having a car with a bad engine. If you have an offensive line that's shaky, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is, doesn't matter, receivers, et cetera, et cetera. It's that offense is only going to go so far if you can't consistently open up holes in the run game. Although against a pretty good Texas Tech defensive front, I thought at times they were actually able to give, especially Brandon Campbell, some decent holes to run through. That was the most, I think, sustained success we've seen from running game, which is admittedly a low bar because you saw basically none of it against UTSA, but you saw some encouraging stuff there. I don't think Clayton Tune was running for his life as much as he was against UTSA. So it's damning with faint praise, but that's what we're dealing with this offensive line right now. But I think what's really bothered me has been, play design. I don't think Clayton Tune played his best against Texas Tech. I would argue that might've been his worst game since Texas Tech last year, though I think played a good deal better than he did in the 2021 opener. I think that you really, if you're the Cougar offensive staff, you've got to look at, some quicker developing pass plays. It felt like watching the Texas Tech offense and then watching the U of H offense. It felt like one of these offenses, U of H, was working really hard to not do very much. And one of them, Texas Tech, seemed to have a good idea how to give Donovan Smith, a young third-year sophomore quarterback, makeable passes, rhythm passes. He definitely struggled in deep balls, and that's how I think U of H ended up with 3 interceptions. But they gave him a lot of stuff in the short and mid-range to get his confidence, to get the offense going, to get that 3, 4, 5 yards at a time that, ironically, we saw U of H just be masters of this 11, 12 years ago when, Dana Holgerson and Cliff Kingsbury were running the offense under Kevin Sumlin. And it just feels like now, it feels like every time U of H tries to pass the ball, I think I texted you, Dustin, something this during the game. It feels like we're trying to run this very complex, a lot of, slow developing pass plays. And just, it doesn't feel like the offense right now in the most general sense is giving Clayton Tune, easy throws, rhythm throws, confidence throws, the, ability to get into a game. It's just, it's 4th and 3 and we're, dialing up this, difficult back shoulder fade to Tank Dell. And if it works, great. But I don't know, man, it's 4th and 3, maybe give the guy something a bit better to work with. But I think it's a lot of things. It's the inability to sustain a run game outside of Brandon Campbell at times in this one. It's an inability to get guys not named Tank Dell involved in the offense. And that's something we heard a lot in the offseason. And I'm not ready to say it was completely not true yet. You're dealing with a lot of guys who are fairly young in their careers, but we heard a lot in the offseason that, the problems U of H had the prior couple seasons with receivers not named Tank Dell really struggling to get involved in the offense. That's going to be a thing of the past. You have Matthew Golden, consensus 4-star out of Klein Kane, a couple of young transfers who are, good recruits out of high school who are really exciting. And you just haven't really been able to see the offense so far, other than that nice touchdown in overtime on the tunnel screen to Matthew Golden to get those guys involved in the offense. So it's been a lot of things not working well at the start. It's not any one thing, but I do feel like it behooves the staff to look at these first 2 weeks and look at what they can do to, make Clayton Tune's life a little easier in the pass game, and also, make the offensive line's life a little easier and not have these slow developing pass plays that maybe, offensive line that's entirely non-seniors might struggle to deal with. But yeah, kind of like I said at the start of your question about the defense, if I had the $64,000 answer to what's ailing this UH offense, I think it'd be a pretty popular guy on Cullen Boulevard right now.
Dustin, do you have a threat that's on the field on offense outside of Tank Dell? Is there another playmaker on this offense, do you think?
I think Matthew Golden can be that. I think Brandon Campbell can be that. With that, Alton McCaskill, certainly if he were healthy, would be the answer to that question. We need to see if Brandon Campbell's going to be healthy because he went out injured and apparently was getting x-rays after the game here as well. Kind of like Sam said, I and like you mentioned with Holgerson not being happy with the offensive line, I think there's a lot of questions to ask about this offensive line, and one that we thought, had some experience, but at the same time, there's not a senior offensive lineman on this roster. And that is, I think, maybe rearing its ugly head more than we expected it to with some of the, sophomores and juniors who had some experience coming back. I think we were thinking that that was going to, represent an offensive line that would be as good or better than it was last year. But it does kind of feel like it's taken a step back. A lot of the young, exciting receivers, the Matthew Goldens, the Joseph Manjaks, guys who I think can be really playmakers in this offense, they've made some exciting plays. Joseph Manjak had, ESPN #1 play of the week in the UTSA game. Matthew Golden's had a couple of really highlight reel plays already, 2 games into his college career. But we've seen this receiving group look inexperienced, have some easy drops. There've been some, even some of the slow developing plays when Clayton Tune, even when he's got some time with his offensive line, has not really had open receivers always to throw to. I think it's really concerning that you've got a senior quarterback in Clayton too, and this is supposed to be his big senior season, has averaged less than 7 yards per pass attempt in each of his first two games of the season. I think that's really concerning. And I think, honestly, Sam talked about some of the play design here, but I think Dana Holgerson needs to take a long, thought about the fact that he's got Shannon Dawson as his quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator. This is a guy who his last job before he came to U of H was offensive coordinator at Southern Miss, a lesser program than U of H. And the fans there were not sad when he left. That's fans don't always know what they're talking about. But, the last time we hired, and again, Houston hired him as a tight ends coach. You go, okay, fine. If he's a tight ends coach, maybe this guy can recruit, great. But then a year later, he gets promoted to offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. And you go, okay, yeah, I understand Dana's largely running the offense here and everything. But, the last time U of H hired a football coordinator that the fans of the previous school were just not sad to see him go was this guy named Mark D'Onofrio, who Major Applewhite hired as DC. And we all tried to talk ourselves into him, and then pretty quickly became obvious, no, this guy actually, there's a reason Miami fans weren't sad to see him go. They kind of did know what they were talking about. And, if you're U of H, you got a senior quarterback, you've got, an next year NFL receiver in Tank Dell, you've got a lot of things going for you, playing against a schedule where you have like one top 60 defense from last year on your schedule this year, and you haven't faced them yet because it's Tulsa. You got a lot of things going for you if you're U of H. The fact that you're averaging under 4 yards per carry and under 7 yards per pass attempt through your first two games should really, really be concerning, because you're not going to have that senior quarterback next year. You're going to be facing a lot of, jokes about Big 12 defenses aside, they're going to be a lot tougher than some of the ones that U of H has on the schedule this year. So I think, despite having, technically you can say you scored in the 30s your first two games, but, definitely I think there's a lot of questions here. Yeah, I think there are some playmakers, to answer your original question for me. There are some playmakers here, but if you don't have fixed some of the larger issues with the offense, then it's not gonna be enough.
I put in my show notes, that is the most deceptive 30 you will ever see from a college team. I don't want to kick this team while they're down, but I'm still marking really that produced 30 points because the offense was just so bad in Lubbock. It's hard to fathom. Sorry, Robert.
Yeah, overtime helps.
A little bit.
One of the things is, you already mentioned it, the fact that U of H has such an easy schedule. It's frustrating when you get off to these, and I feel like this is a pattern. And I'm going to ask you guys, Sam or Dustin, whichever one of you wants to jump in here. Is it fair to say that Holgerson's teams are having a habit of rough starts, or they're struggling at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I guess you kind of have to say it is a little bit of a trend. You had a couple of years ago, the red shirt team that looked looked bad enough at the start that it kind of led Holgerson to do the whole great red shirt experiment. You had U of H really just lay an egg against Texas Tech at home when they had a chance to, again, you won the next 11 games, so you're showing up to that game away from potentially being 12-0 and setting up the most exciting AAC championship game of all time against Cincinnati. It was still a pretty good one. But I think I think it's a fair question to raise at this point. Not only the slow starts, but kind of just seeing the coming out of the season with just a lot of the self-inflicted errors. And Dana Holgerson can give all the fun quotes about, oh yeah, let's stop doing dumb crap. And okay, yeah, that's a fun quote, and that kind of lets the fan base know, hey, Coach Holgerson sees the same things you're seeing. He is also frustrated by the mental errors. But I think it's also worth noting that U of H is one play here or there away from being 0-2 right now. And as much as 1-1, having played two good teams on the road isn't the worst thing in the world, there's a lot of teams in this country that if they played UTSA and Texas Tech on the road back-to-back to open the season wouldn't be 2-0, would be 1-1 at best. So if you just look at it from that perspective, sure, the first two games haven't been, the worst thing in the world. And there certainly have been some really bright spots and some exciting things, some good players. The way the defensive line is playing right now is just over the moon incredible and really, really exciting, things like that. But like I said, with the offense really not getting going thus far, with U of H being, they're really, really close to being 2-0. They're also really, really close to being 0-2. So I think it is fair at this point to wonder if Dana Holgerson is going to be able to get his U of H teams, off and ready to, get going right out of the gates, as opposed to kind of rounding into form.
Yeah, that's the thing. They've played Texas Tech a couple of times in recent years, and the Texas Techs are the teams that you're going to be playing on a regular basis in the Big 12.
Exactly. Yep.
And it hadn't gone all that well. And, this coming Saturday, hey, it's a Big 12 team that's no gimme. The Jayhawks, the Jayhawks aren't a joke. I hate saying that. I couldn't even get out of my mouth. I'm a Mizzou guy, but the Cougs favored by 10, and I'm not so sure about that. And I've seen power rankings where it's kind of an even matchup. What do you think, Sam?
I'd like to see how this team does at home. I would agree with what Dustin said, by the way. I think, this team has been very close to being 0-2. I don't think you can call this a strong start to the season, even if some individual parts I think have done quite well on this team. I would like to see how this team does in the friendly confines. There aren't many teams out there that have had to play 2 road games to start their season. So, I do think, as bad as it's looked in these first 2 games, at least you're getting an accurate picture of what's wrong with your team. I mean, you could have gone out there and played, an FCS team in Rice to start the year. You'd be 2-0, but you'd know precisely as much about U of H now as you did in the preseason. But I certainly am not spending my hard-earned American dollars on U of H minus 10 so far. I wasn't surprised that U of H was more than a few point favorite, but I was certainly surprised it was as high as 9.5 to 10. This is really one of those situations, if you told me the preseason that Kansas would start looking like the best part of it, or the better than I would say most any team we've seen in the last 11 or 12 seasons there, I've been like, good. We finally, got like a decent non-conference opponent out of this team that I expected to just be a total cakewalk once we were sure this team was going to stay on the schedule. But right now, I honestly would be much rather playing the 2010 through 2021 version of Kansas football. I mean, we talked about how UTSA and Texas Tech were designed to really stress this U of H defense. And while I think Kansas is a bit more run-oriented than those first 2 teams, and I think that might play in the Cougar hands a bit more, that's a good offense. They really started to figure things out in the second half of last season. All jokes about the burnt orange school in Austin aside, I watched a good amount of that game from last year on YouTube, and it wasn't fluky. You could see they had a clear idea how to use Jaden Daniels, and they have a lot of skill guys who really understand what that offense wants to do. And I think they could absolutely be a 4 to 6 win team, which for Kansas football in the last decade or so is darn near miraculous. And if it does come to fruition like that, should have Lance Leipold in the coach of the year discussion. I want to see how this team plays in the friendly confines. I think it'll be a bit more clean at home, but a bit more clean doesn't guarantee an easy victory against this opponent who I'm sure they're going to play up to them. Hey, no one respects you guys. Even after that big win at West Virginia, Houston still thinks you guys are the Kansas of old. So I think there will be no lack of motivation from the visiting team. And I would be over the moon if U of H covers this game, just given what we've seen from the Jayhawks to the first 2 and given kind of the negative stuff we've seen from the Cougars in the first 2.
Yeah, you didn't say it, Sam, but 55 and 56 points the first 2 games by the Jayhawks. The first game, that was a nobody school, but West Virginia, not so much a nobody school, and they ran up some points on them. And I just, I want to see U of H correct the mistakes, the penalties, just the basic stuff. I don't care if the offense isn't perfect at this point, guys. I just want to see mistakes that get corrected. After 2 weeks. This should not be a thing anymore. And I don't care if you're playing crummy schools after this in conference. This is about judging what the Cougars are going to be next year and going forward, not this year.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about the Jayhawks, you look back heading to last year, their last 5 games this year and heading back to last year, their last 5 games are 3-2, wins over UT and West Virginia, and 1-score losses to TCU and West Virginia at the end of last year. So, the last team to beat them by that 10 points that Houston played was all their 4th to last game when they got beat pretty badly by Kansas State at the end of last year. So this is not a team that you can just expect to just roll over by 10 points if you're making mental mistakes. And like you said, Robert, if UH doesn't cut down significantly on those mental mistakes that we saw in week 1 and week 2, then probably the best case scenario is that we're going to another overtime game and hoping for the bounce of the ball to go the right way in overtime.
Do you have somewhere where you're counting off your days till basketball season? Do you guys know the number as I'm talking to you guys right now on a Monday?
I don't know the number. I will, once we get towards the end of October, I'll start thinking more seriously about that. And that's not to say that I'm not incredibly excited about Cougar basketball season getting going, but not giving up on this football team yet. I still feel like this Houston Cougar football team has a pretty good chance to make a run at an AAC title this year. And very excited about Cougar volleyball, looking like a borderline top 25 team right now. Chance to break the NCAA tournament curse, first time since 2000. So definitely still locked in on the fall sports, but got maybe half an eye towards basketball season.
Yeah, I know it's roughly 2 months from now, and I would say any countdown on my part is more out of just sheer excitement for that team rather than any kind of negativity towards the football program. Though if the next month doesn't go so hot, I might have a more clear idea of that number. If I'm being honest,
ask me a week from now if we lose to Kansas, I might know how many days until basketball season at that point.
Might set an alert on my phone.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things is, I heard it when Dustin said it. I'm still thinking about the AAC title, and I guess the difference is when you're talking about Cougar football, you're talking about the AAC title, and then when you're talking about Cougar basketball, you're like, hey, what about an NCAA title? How about one of those things? That's the big
exactly. Yeah, different goals, I would say. Though the different goals allowed by the sports postseason format as well. Though not. Obviously, don't think Cougar football would be a top 12 team, even with the upcoming format, really, as of right now.
I tell you what, I had a guy named Corey Tullaba who does a really good NBA draft podcast with Albert Gim. It's the Draft Doc podcast, and they had an hour on Jarace Walker. And basically, it was just a big love fest. And one of them said he thinks that Walker is he said he is he's third on his NBA draft board. So that kind of took me aback with the other guys that are out there. But they're excited about him. And at the end of the show, they're saying, yeah, I want to get down to Houston and see this guy. And I'm like, wow, that's high praise, because we haven't had that at the University of Houston, and I don't know, maybe 40 years, 35 years, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was a CBS. I can't remember if it was CBS, ESPN, one of the big outlets. I was reading one of their way too early 2023 mock draft things in the last month or so. And there were 3 Cougars on there in the top 40 picks. And there have been good players that come through this program. And I think it's a testament to Kelvin Sampson that he's consistently leveled up the talent of this program. The first NCAA tournament team or two here didn't have a lot of serious NBA guys on it, but he was finding the kind of junkyard dog, junior college and D1 transfer guys who are going to go in there and outwork the opponents. And you kind of have seen it. You've seen the program's talent level kind of rise looking at the front court players, the big men, because, those early Sampson teams, I love Rob Gray, Corey Davis, Armani Brooks, those guys, those guys, in my opinion, those are the founding fathers, Damian Dotson, like even further, of this generation, of this program, guys who I have just the most admiration for as players. But other than Dotson and Brooks, who are kind of, fringe NBA guys, weren't really serious NBA prospects. But the guard talent's always been there. But now you have guys like Jarace Walker coming through. Josh Carlton last year was first team all conference. I would say Josh Carlton's ceiling obviously a bit lower than Jarace Walker, but Josh Carlton this past season gave you more consistently from a big man than you've ever seen under Kelvin Sampson. And now that guard talent, that guard ability is now matched with a true difference maker front court guy like Jarace Walker to go along with Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shed, and all of the really, really exciting returning pieces from this group.
I'm blanking. Who was the McDonald's All-American? There was the guy a few years ago.
Quentin Grimes.
No. Before him, there was I think he was from Alabama.
Devontae Pollard.
That's right. That's it.
I can't believe I beat Dustin on that one. Dustin's a big Devontae Pollard.
The entire time you were sitting here talking about all the guards, the defending followers, I was like trying to come up with, I'm like, who's that? No. We had the transfer power forward. It was really good though. What was it? Yeah. Devontae Pollard was,
what a poll.
Yeah. Well, impressed with him. Kind of wish he had gotten to be around and be on some better Cougar teams, because he was a good player. But kind of like Sam said, though, definitely different caliber of player entirely when you're talking about bringing in someone like Jarace Walker, the #1 high school power forward in the country.
By the way, Quentin Grimes, he was somebody that they had to take out of a Donovan Mitchell trade conversation they were like, we're not so sure we want to trade Quentin Grimes for an all-star as part of an all-star guard package, the desperate New York Knicks. So that was pretty high praise for Quentin Grimes in that trade discussion.
I was actually surprised they sent him out to Summer League here this year, just because he played such a big role last year. I thought he would get on the court some, but I would say he definitely played a larger role as a rookie than I expected. It certainly seems like that organization there considers him at least some part of the future.
I'm real interested to see how he's going to develop because, without the Donovan Mitchell deal, he might be the starter this year. And that's going to be interesting to see. And just a lot of buzz about him for a Knicks team that doesn't have a lot of buzz guys. So that was kind of fun. Let me just close it off with, I want to get what's going on with the podcast. Tell me what's going on, Dustin. What are you guys working on right now?
Yeah, well, we're squarely into football season now, which means we've gone to 2 episodes a week. So we try to get usually on like Saturday, Sunday. We're about to record it here on Monday night, do our recap of the Texas Tech game, and then in a couple of days we'll have the previewing the Kansas game. We got some Kansas folks that we're going to talk to, make sure we have the full lowdown on the Jayhawks. And then obviously talk about all the other Cougar sports, because of course that's always our thing, is covering every Cougar sport in season. So be sure to give, wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to the Scott Holman Pawdcast. Like I said, lots and lots of content during football season. Always have a full recap, full breakdown of every game, as well as talking about some other sports. Like I said, Cougar volleyball doing real well right now. And before you know it, we'll be previewing Cougar men's and women's basketball. So it's always, the fall is always like jumping in with both feet. You have the whole summer, kind of trying to struggle for content, put something out every week. And then all of a sudden you look up and it's like got multiple hours of stuff to talk about every week. So very excited to be doing this podcast. And like I said, make sure to give us a follow on Twitter at SHPodcast, SHPAWDCAST, and we're Twitter degenerates. So give us a follow over there. And like I said, if you like the Cougs, we got Cougar content coming fast and heavy right now.
Yeah, and you said it. You got somebody covering the other team this week, as you do pretty much every week during football season, which is great. And of course, go check them out on Twitter. Go follow them if you aren't already. About the podcast. We've had them on many times, but hopefully some more people out there are finding us and are finding you, because it's the definitive thing. And the Cougars, have been an incredible story in 2 sports the last couple of years, definitely in basketball for the last few years, but in football now too. So with them going to the Big 12, you guys are in part of the Big 12 network, right, Sam? You guys are doing that now too.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. I'm not going to bore everyone too much with the podcast inside business, but trust me that we have seen a bump from the fact that this is a Big 12 program now. And that I think obviously we're the kind of people who are excited about U of H playing anyone. We became fans of this team when we were part of something called Conference USA, something I hope to never have to think about ever again. So we're the kind of sickos who are bought in generally, but it's very exciting to think about a future on our show where we're talking about, Big 12 men's basketball speaks for itself, is just consistently the best league year in, year out in the sport. And excited, even if the win-loss totals are going to be a bit more on the loss side in that league, just really excited to see that, really excited to see an improved football product, and just the buzz around playing, the Baylors and Texas Techs and TCUs and even Oklahoma State, and probably for at least a brief period there, a certain burnt orange school in Austin and a certain crimson and cream school just north of the border here. So I'm excited. I'm just excited for what that's going to do for UH exposure wise, and obviously excited to talk about those kind of matchups that, get a bit more of the juice than playing East Carolina or South Florida, with all respect to our Pirate and Bull friends out there.
Looking forward to the Kansas game this week and the rest of the season in football. Always a blast having you guys on the show. Thanks so much for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having us, Robert. Always enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, thanks a bunch, Robert.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, you can support the show by subscribing on YouTube and commenting on the videos. Listen to Houston Sports Talk on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and Google. Don't forget to tell a friend and share our show on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.